Leo Morgan wasn't a remarkable boy. At West Side Middle School, a place filled with laughter and adolescent whispers, he was an invisible ghost, a name that was called out on the attendance sheet, and then immediately forgotten. His hazel eyes often stared into space as if his mind were elsewhere. And it was. Leo's world wasn't the roaring basketball court or the latest video games. His world was an infinite universe of numbers, winding curves, and complex equations. While his math teacher, Ms. Veronica Stone, stood at the front of the classroom sketching simple 8th grade equations on the board, Leo's mind was filled with the calculus formulas he had taught himself from dusty old library books. It was a secret world, a world that belonged only to him. His father, a bricklayer with calloused hands, often said, "Numbers are the language of the universe, son. When people stop making sense, numbers always will." Those words became Leo's guiding light. Living in a small apartment and sharing a room with his sister, he had no private space to hang football posters. Instead, his bedroom walls were decorated with printouts of mathematical theorems, complex formulas he'd found online. They were his own works of art paintings that only he could understand. Ms. Stone, with her severe bun and cold demeanor, held an inexplicable prejudice against Leo. She saw him as an anomaly, a typical C student from a working-class family. She had no idea that just a few blocks away, in a quiet corner of the public library, Leo was immersed in complex mathematical concepts that even college students struggled with. And then Ms. Stone saw it. One evening, she happened to walk past the library. Through the glass doors, she saw Leo. He wasn't reading comics or playing games like the other kids. He was absorbed in a calculus book. Her face darkened. To her, the idea that a lazy, low-scoring boy could understand this advanced knowledge was an insult, a betrayal of her entire dedicated teaching career. From that moment on, Leo was no longer an invisible student. He had become a target. Leo's life at school became a long series of stress-filled days. Ms. Stone constantly found ways to scrutinize and criticize him. Her tests were designed for him to fail, with subtly crafted trick questions. Leo, not wanting to draw attention to himself, silently endured it. He could solve these problems easily in his head, but he intentionally wrote down wrong answers to get an average grade as a way of blending in and staying hidden. But Ms. Stone wasn't satisfied with his silence. She wanted him to admit her authority, her possession of knowledge. She wanted to break his will. And then it happened. One afternoon, while giving a lesson, she called Leo to the board to solve a simple problem. Though the problem was easy, Miss Stone kept making biting comments that made Leo lose his focus. He fumbled a bit, and that was all she needed. "Stand up straight, Morgan," she snapped. "I will not tolerate a disrespectful posture." Ms. Stone used a long wooden ruler, striking his back repeatedly. The searing pain burrowed deep into his muscles. The wound wasn't just on his back, it was carved deep into his soul. The physical pain healed over time, but the emotional pain did not. Leo learned a harsh lesson: being different was dangerous, and silence was the only way to survive. He hid the red welts on his back and the growing fear in his heart. That's why a week later, when he walked into Ms. Stone's classroom, his body hadn't fully recovered and his back ached so much he couldn't sit down. He knew this day wouldn't be easy, but he never imagined that today, the secret world he had tried so hard to protect would be exposed and everything would change forever. That day, Leo walked into Ms. Stone's class a few minutes late. His back was throbbing, a dull but persistent ache that made it impossible to sit. He stood tucked away in the back corner of the room, hoping no one would notice. "Late again? Morgan." Ms. Stone's voice cut through the silent classroom like a shard of ice. She didn't look at him, but continued writing her lesson on the board. "Take a seat." Leo took a deep breath, speaking timidly. I'm sorry, Ms. Stone. Is it okay if I stand today?" Ms. Stone's sharp eyes finally landed on Leo. "Absolutely not. Sit down like the other students." "But my back," Leo stammered, his sentence hanging in the air. Ms. Stone curled her lip, a smirk clear on her face. "Your back, is that today's excuse? Yesterday, it was a family emergency. Today, it's your back. How creative, Morgan." A few students in the class giggled. Leo felt his entire body flush with heat. He clutched his backpack straps as if they were his only lifeline. He had endured humiliation before, but he'd never felt so helpless. The physical pain, the shame, and the frustration swirled together, a heavy weight on his shoulders. "I can't sit, Ms. Stone," Leo said, his voice trembling slightly but containing a strange new resolve. "I can't." The room fell silent. The ticking of the wall clock grew louder than ever. Ms. Stone's eyes narrowed dangerously. She stared at Leo, her expression shifting from anger to a chilling calm. "Fine," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "If you feel you're so special, maybe you should show us just how special you are." She wiped away the 8th grade algebra problem she'd just written, and replaced it with a series of complex symbols and equations the class had never seen. "This," she said with a wicked smile, "is a calculus problem for my 11th grade advanced class. If you think you're too good to follow basic rules, perhaps you can solve this while standing." Laughter erupted throughout the class like a chorus of mocking crows. Zach, a class troublemaker, made a show of pretending to cry. "Ha ha ha, poor thing." "You have 5 minutes," Ms. Stone said, glancing at the clock, "or you'll be in detention all week." Leo stared at the board. His heart pounded, but not with fear. Beneath the layer of anxiety, something was sparking a flash of recognition. These symbols weren't alien. They were his language, the dance of numbers he had learned in his secret world. Leo Morgan stood still facing the blackboard. The laughter of his classmates slowly faded, replaced by curiosity. Most of them believed Leo would give up because who could solve an 11th grade problem, especially a spacey student like him? "4 minutes left, Morgan," Ms. Stone announced loudly, her voice filled with triumph. "Perhaps this will teach you to follow the rules." But Leo didn't hear a thing. His mind was elsewhere, where formulas and theorems were connecting perfectly. The problem was a complex integral requiring a substitution method. Difficult, but not impossible. His heartbeat steadied, the initial fear melting away, leaving only intense focus. With a trembling hand, he picked up a piece of chalk and moved toward the board. "Oh, he's actually trying to solve it," someone whispered. Ms. Stone leaned against her desk, her arms crossed, a self-satisfied smile on her face. "The clock is ticking." Leo took a deep breath and started writing. His hand moved with increasing confidence, filling the board with a series of steps, substitutions, and calculations. The students' whispers turned into confused murmurs. "What is he doing?" Zach whispered a little too loudly. "No way," another student replied. Leo continued to solve, completely lost in his own world. The pain in his back seemed to vanish, and the judging eyes around him dissolved. All that remained was the beauty of the numbers and symbols, a language he completely mastered. About 3 minutes later, he double-underlined the answer and turned to face the class. The silence was staggering. Ms. Stone abruptly stood up and walked toward the board. Her eyes scanned the solution, her face changing from smugness to confusion and finally to disbelief. This is, she stammered, sweeping her eyes over Leo's work again. "Where did you get this?" she demanded, her voice sharp with accusation. Did you memorize it from somewhere? No, ma'am, Leo replied, his voice soft. I just solved it. Impossible. Miss Stone's voice rose. There is no way a CO student like you could have solved this legitimately. But I did, Leo insisted, his voice holding a hint of defiance for the first time. That's enough, Ms. Stone snapped, cutting him off. She snatched the chalk from Leo's hand and forcefully erased the elegant equations he had written. Then, in a moment of fury, she grabbed a scrap piece of paper from his hand and tore it in half. To the principal's office immediately, she screamed, for cheating insubordination and disrupting the class. As Leo quietly gathered his things under the stunned gazes of his classmates, Zach, who had been a bully to Leo, looked at him with something new in his eyes, confusion and perhaps a flicker of respect. But, Miss Maxwell, a small voice from the back of the room said. It was Aisha, a shy girl. What if Leo really did get it right? Ms. Stone's icy glare silenced any further words. Not another word. Leo, get out. Leo left the classroom, his head held high. Behind him, the two torn pieces of paper fell to the floor, physical evidence of a truth Ms. Stone refused to accept. And in the chaos, Aisha bent down, picked up one of the torn halves, and quietly put it in her backpack. Leo Morgan sat alone on a hard wooden bench outside Principal Williams' office, his backpack clutched like a shield. This wasn't the first time he'd waited here, but the circumstances had never been like this. From behind the frosted glass door, he could hear Ms. Stone's voice rising and falling in accusation. A clear case of insubordination and academic dishonesty. Her voice boomed dramatically. He refused to sit down, disrupted the class, and then somehow produced a solution to an advanced problem he couldn't possibly have solved legitimately. Principal Williams' deeper voice replied. Are you certain he cheated? Absolutely certain, Ms. Stone answered instantly. Morgan has been a CO student in my class all year. For him to suddenly solve a college-level calculus problem is impossible. He must have memorized it or had the solution hidden away. Leo closed his eyes, a wave of despair washing over him. Ms. Stone had always targeted him, but this was different. This time he had done the right thing, and she was punishing him for it. The door opened and Principal Williams emerged. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and perpetually tired eyes. Come in, Morgan, he said in a cold voice. Inside, Ms. Stone sat upright in a chair, her lips pressed into a thin line. Ms. Stone has told me everything, Principal Williams began, settling into his desk chair. Do you have anything to say, Morgan? I didn't cheat, sir, Leo said, trying to keep his voice from shaking. I solved the problem correctly. Ms. Stone scoffed. Ridiculous. You have shown no aptitude for math in class ever. But I've been teaching myself advanced math for almost a year, Leo said softly. A very convenient story, Ms. Stone interjected before the principal could react. And I suppose next you'll tell us you're secretly a NASA scientist. Principal Williams held up a hand, silencing Ms. Stone. Morgan, why did you refuse to sit down in class? Leo hesitated, his eyes darting to Ms. Stone. Her warning gaze was clear. I fell, he lied, looking down at the floor. He's lying, Ms. Stone smoothly cut in. This is clearly a fabricated excuse to justify his insubordination. First the refusal to sit, then the cheating. It's all a desperate cry for attention. Principal Williams observed Leo for a long moment. Ms. Stone has been teaching math for over 20 years, Morgan, he said. She's one of our most experienced teachers. If she says that problem was beyond your capabilities, I'm inclined to believe her. Something inside Leo broke. He had spent months teaching himself hours bent over borrowed books and free online courses. It was all for nothing because no one would believe him. "I did solve it," he insisted, his voice cracking. "I can solve another one, any calculus problem." Ms. Stone let out a sharp, derisive laugh. "This performance is becoming tiresome." 2 days of detention for insubordination and disrupting class. Principal Williams decided picking up a detention slip. "And consider this a warning regarding academic dishonesty." As the principal wrote out the slip, Leo noticed the triumphant smirk on Ms. Stone's face. She had won, as she always did. Just as Principal Williams was handing the slip to Leo, a soft knock came at the door. It opened and Ms. Carter, the science teacher, appeared. She was a younger woman with bright eyes and a genuine enthusiasm for learning that made her popular with students. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, glancing between the three of them. "I was told Leo was in here." Her eyes landed on Leo with unconcealed worry. "Is everything all right?" Before Principal Williams or Ms. Stone could reply, Ms. Carter saw the detention slip in Leo's hand. "What's going on?" "Just a disciplinary matter, Diana," Ms. Stone said coolly. "Nothing related to science." Ms. Carter raised an eyebrow. "Actually, if it involves one of my top students, it does." "Top student," Ms. Stone scoffed. "That's right," Ms. Carter replied pointedly. "Leo." She turned to Principal Williams. "What is he being punished for?" Principal Williams cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Ms. Stone says he disrupted class and tried to cheat on a calculus problem she gave him." Ms. Carter's eyes widened. "Calculus? And you think he cheated?" She turned to Leo. "Does this have anything to do with your science fair project from last spring?" Leo gave a small nod, a flicker of hope in his eyes, for the first time since he'd walked into the office. "What science project?" Principal Williams asked, frowning. Ms. Carter smiled. "Leo's project on the mathematical modeling of plant growth. It won 3rd place overall, but 1st place in the math category. It involved differential equations that most 11th grade students would struggle with." Ms. Stone's mouth opened, but no words came out. "I discovered Leo's mathematical talent last year," Ms. Carter continued. "He was using advanced formulas in his lab reports that weren't even in our curriculum. When I asked him about it, he showed me some of his independent work." She looked at Leo. "You still have those notebooks, right?" Leo nodded again, much more confidently this time. "That's impossible," Ms. Stone finally managed to say. "He can't even pass my class." "That's because your class is too boring for him," Ms. Carter said matter-of-factly. "No offense, Veronica, but Leo is working at a much higher level than what you're teaching." Principal Williams was bewildered. "Why was I not made aware of this sooner?" "Leo asked me not to make a big deal out of it," Ms. Carter explained. "He doesn't like drawing attention to himself." She looked at Leo with an apologetic gaze. "But I couldn't stand by and watch you get punished for something you didn't do." The atmosphere in the room changed abruptly. Principal Williams was lost in thought, while Ms. Stone's face became hard, a mixture of disbelief and fury. This still doesn't explain his refusal to follow basic classroom rules. Ms. Stone insisted, her voice holding the last shred of her confidence. "Actually," Ms. Carter said cautiously, "I'd like to know more about that too." She turned to Leo, her expression gentle but direct. "Leo, you said your back hurt." The air in the office grew tense. Principal Williams looked at Leo, then at Ms. Stone. Leo hesitated, shifting his weight and wincing slightly. Ms. Carter's eyes caught the moment. "Leo," she said softly, "would you mind showing us?" Ms. Stone suddenly stood up. "This is ridiculous. We're wasting time on theatrics." Principal Williams held up a hand for silence, his expression growing grim. "Leo, please show us what Ms. Carter is talking about." Reluctantly, Leo slowly lifted his shirt, just enough to reveal a few dark red welts branded onto his back. They were the unmistakable marks of a ruler or a similar object. Ms. Carter gasped softly. Principal Williams stood up abruptly, his face darkening. "Who did this to you, son?" he asked, though his eyes were on Ms. Stone, who was now pale. I fell," Leo stammered, pulling his shirt down in a hurry. "Leo," Ms. Carter said gently, "no one gets welts like that from falling." Ms. Stone, her face panicked, tried to regain control. "He's clearly trying to manipulate the situation. This is a blatant attempt to distract from his behavior. Who knows where those marks came from, maybe at home or a fight with friends." "Ms. Stone, that's enough," Principal Williams said, his voice hard. He turned to Leo. "These marks, were they made at school?" Leo looked at the floor, silent. "Leo," Ms. Carter encouraged. "Telling the truth is not insubordination." "Last week," Leo whispered, "I couldn't solve a problem on the board fast enough." His confession hung in the air like a poison. Principal Williams' face was full of anger as he turned to Miss Stone, who was hurriedly gathering her things. "This meeting is clearly no longer productive," Ms. Stone said, her voice strained. "These baseless accusations—" "Sit down, Ms. Stone," Principal Williams commanded. "We are far from finished." He turned back to Leo and Ms. Carter. "This is a serious matter, one that requires a formal investigation. But first," he tapped his fingers on the desk, "I think we need to address the ongoing academic issue. Leo, do you truly believe you can solve advanced calculus problems?" "Yes, sir," Leo replied with a quiet confidence. "Then I propose a test," Principal Williams announced. "A fair assessment of Leo's mathematical abilities, administered under supervision to eliminate any possibility of cheating." Ms. Stone narrowed her eyes. "Fine. I'll prepare an appropriate test immediately." "Actually," Ms. Carter interjected, "given the circumstances, it might be better if the test was prepared by someone else." "Are you questioning my professional integrity?" Ms. Stone snapped. "I'm suggesting we eliminate any perceived bias," Ms. Carter replied calmly, "for everyone's sake." Principal Williams nodded. "Ms. Stone, you will still prepare the test, but I will review it beforehand to ensure it's fair." He turned to Leo. "How about tomorrow morning? It gives you some time to prepare." Leo nodded, though the anxiety was clear in his eyes. "Okay." "In the meantime," Principal Williams continued, "I will be contacting your parents about the marks on your back, and the detention will be postponed until the results of this test are in." Ms. Stone stood up again, her stride full of fury. "If you're going to allow this charade, I want it done properly. The test must include problems from multiple levels all the way up to calculus. If he's the math prodigy Ms. Carter claims, he'll have no problem proving it." "Agreed," Principal Williams said definitively. "But let me be clear, Ms. Stone. If Leo passes this test, we will be having a serious conversation about appropriate teaching methods and classroom conduct." As Leo left the office with Ms. Carter, he felt a strange mix of dread and relief. Tomorrow would decide whether his secret ability would be validated or if Ms. Stone would find a new way to punish him for daring to be different. Miss Stone, after leaving the office, walked in a daze. Back in her classroom, she twisted her sweater in her hands, resentment and fear bubbling up inside her. She had spent her entire life building her reputation, and now a stubborn child and a young science teacher were threatening to tear it all down. She pulled out her phone, her finger hovering over a name she hadn't called in years, James Roberts. Dr. James Roberts, a math professor at the local university, wasn't surprised to see Ms. Stone's name on his screen. Years ago, they had been rivals in a prestigious math competition. Ms. Stone had been a brilliant, promising young student. But it was James who had surpassed her in the final round, and afterward her career stagnated while his advanced. Ms. Stone always believed he had gotten lucky, and that bitterness had followed her for 30 years. "Veronica?" Dr. Roberts said, his voice warm. "Have you heard?" she asked, her voice trembling. "If you're talking about a boy named Leo, Morgan." "I have," he replied. "He's my student." Ms. Stone froze. "What? What are you talking about?" Dr. Roberts briefly explained his connection to Leo, how he had discovered the boy's talent at the public library. "I've been in touch with his parents, Veronica. The boy has a truly unique mind." She felt a dizzying lurch. Not a cheater, but a student of James Roberts himself. Suddenly, all her anger transformed into a profound fear. She wasn't facing a child. She was facing her own past. "The test," she said, her voice desperate. "I'm going to prepare a test to prove he's a fraud." "Veronica," Dr. Roberts said, his voice turning stern, "don't do that. The truth will always come out. And there's one thing I want you to know. When you gave that boy that problem, he wasn't afraid. He saw the beauty in it just as I once saw it in you. Don't let your own fear destroy another talent." Ms. Stone didn't reply. She hung up and sat in silence. Her rage and bitterness weren't just directed at Leo, but at herself. She knew the battle was over, and she had lost. That evening, Leo sat across from Dr. Roberts at a familiar library table. The professor, with his salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes, looked at Leo with concern. "So your teacher finally figured out you're good?" Dr. Roberts said, his eyes twinkling behind his glasses. "Not exactly," Leo replied, recounting the entire story from the welts on his back to the test tomorrow, and Miss Stone's desperation at being caught. Dr. Roberts's face darkened as he heard about the welts. "That's abuse, Leo," he said. "That's not acceptable." "I know," Leo admitted. "But no one would believe me if I said something. She's been teaching there forever." Dr. Roberts shook his head sadly. "Too often we protect institutions instead of the people we're supposed to serve." He sat up straighter, his voice becoming more focused. "Now, about the test. Based on what you told me, Ms. Stone is going to try to make it as hard as possible. She might even include trick questions." "I'm scared," Leo confessed. "What if I freeze up? What if I can't remember the formulas?" "Math isn't about memorizing formulas, Leo," Dr. Roberts reminded him gently. "It's about understanding the concepts and seeing the patterns. Trust your instincts, Leo. Your brain was built to think this way. That's the one thing Ms. Stone can't take away from you." For the next 2 hours, they went through various concepts from basic algebra to complex calculus. Dr. Roberts didn't just drill Leo on specific problems, but focused on reinforcing his understanding of the concepts and how to approach problems. As they packed up their books, Dr. Roberts hesitated. "Leo, tomorrow would you like me to come to the school? Not for the test, that's your moment, but to help explain your abilities to the principal." Leo looked up in surprise. "Really?" "Of course," Dr. Roberts smiled warmly. "That's what a mentor does. We don't just teach. We stand up for our students." For the first time since the classroom incident, Leo felt a real sense of hope. Tomorrow wouldn't just be about proving Ms. Stone wrong. It would be about finally being seen for who he truly was. The next morning, Leo Morgan arrived at school early. His stomach a tight knot of nerves. The hallways were still empty, with only a few teachers preparing for the day. Principal Williams had arranged for the test to take place in a conference room, instead of Ms. Stone's classroom, a small comfort that Leo appreciated. As he approached the conference room, he saw Ms. Carter waiting outside. "I thought you might need a little moral support," she said, offering an encouraging smile. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," Leo admitted. "But ready." Ms. Carter gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Just do your best. That's all anyone can ask." Inside the conference room, Principal Williams and Miss Samu Stone were already seated. A sealed envelope sat in the middle of the table. "Good morning, Morgan," Principal Williams said with a somber tone. "Before we begin, I want to explain the procedure. Inside this envelope are math problems ranging from 8th grade algebra to advanced calculus, Miss Stone prepared them, and I've reviewed them to ensure they're appropriate. You'll have 2 hours to complete as much as you can." Ms. Stone sat with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "The problems increase in difficulty," she added. "I don't expect you to get through all of them. I'll be surprised if you make it past the first page." Ms. Carter frowned at the comment, but said nothing. "I will be supervising to ensure there is no cheating," Principal Williams continued. "Ms. Stone and Ms. Carter will be waiting outside. Do you have any questions?" Leo shook his head and sat down. "Then let's begin," Principal Williams said, opening the envelope and placing the test in front of Leo along with a few pencils and a calculator. "You may start." As the two teachers stepped outside, Leo took a deep breath and looked at the first problem. It was a simple, almost insultingly easy algebra equation. He solved it in a matter of seconds and moved on. The first page was filled with standard 8th grade problems, which Leo finished in less than 5 minutes. The second page had more complex algebra and basic trigonometry, still well within his comfort zone. By the third page, the problems had shifted to pre-calculus level. Leo worked steadily, pausing occasionally to double-check his work. When he reached the calculus problems on the 4th page, he felt a sense of familiarity. They were similar to the exercises he'd done with Dr. Roberts. Outside the conference room, Ms. Stone paced impatiently, while Ms. Carter sat quietly reading a science journal. "This is a complete waste of time," Veronica muttered. "He's probably just staring at the blank paper." "Why is his success such a threat to you?" Ms. Carter asked, without looking up from her journal. Veronica stopped. "Excuse me." "You've been teaching for over 20 years, Ms. Carter said, finally meeting her eyes. "Your position is secure, your reputation is established. So why does the thought of one particular student excelling bother you so much?" Before Veronica could reply, the conference room door opened. Principal Williams stepped out, his expression unreadable. "He's asking for more paper," he announced. "He's finished the entire test." Veronica's face went white. "That's impossible. It's only been a little over 40 minutes. "Nevertheless," Principal Williams replied, grabbing more paper from a nearby cabinet. "He has completed every single problem and is now providing alternate solutions for some of them." As Principal Williams went back into the conference room, Veronica's composure visibly crumbled. He must have cheated somehow. He must have a phone hidden. "He was searched before he went in at your request," Ms. Carter reminded her, "and Principal Williams has not left his side. At some point, Veronica, you'll have to accept that you were wrong about Leo." Inside the conference room, Leo was in his element. The anxiety had vanished as he immersed himself in the elegant language of mathematics. For each of the calculus problems, he provided multiple approaches explaining his reasoning in neat, precise handwriting. When he finally put his pencil down, almost an hour earlier than the allotted time, a strange sense of peace came over him. No matter what happened next, he had done his best. The truth of his ability was there on paper, unable to be torn or disputed. Principal Williams collected the completed test. "I'll make copies for Ms. Stone and Ms. Carter to review independently. We'll reconvene at lunch to discuss the results." As Leo left the conference room, he noticed a few students peering curiously from the end of the hallway. Word of the special test had spread, and whispers followed him throughout the morning. For the first time in his school life, Leo didn't mind the attention. He wasn't being noticed for being a problem to be solved, but for solving a problem. The tension in Principal Williams' office was palpable when Leo walked in at 12:30 p.m. Ms. Stone sat stiffly in a chair, a copy of Leo's test on her lap, her face a mask of suppressed emotion. Ms. Carter sat in another chair, a gentle smile on her face as she gave Leo an encouraging nod. Principal Williams gestured to the remaining chair. "Have a seat, Leo." Leo hesitated, his back still aching. "I've arranged for a cushion," Principal Williams said, pointing to a soft pillow on the seat. The small acknowledgement of his injury was not lost on Leo, who sat down carefully, grateful for the consideration. "I've reviewed your test," Principal Williams began, "as have Ms. Stone and Ms. Carter. Before we discuss the results, is there anything you'd like to say?" Leo glanced at Ms. Stone, whose lips were pressed into a tight line. "No, sir," he replied softly. "The work speaks for itself." "Indeed," Principal Williams agreed, holding up his copy of the test. "You not only answered every question correctly, but you also provided multiple solution methods for the advanced problems. Ms. Carter, what is your assessment?" Ms. Carter leaned forward eager. "Leo's work shows not just a knowledge of procedures, but a profound understanding of the concepts. His approach to the calculus problems demonstrates a mathematical creativity and intuition that is rare even in gifted students." "And you, Ms. Stone?" Principal Williams prompted. Veronica cleared her throat. "The basic algebra and trigonometry are correct," she grudgingly conceded. "However, I remain skeptical about the advanced sections. The solutions are technically right, but..." "But what?" Ms. Carter interrupted. "The problems were yours. The test environment was controlled, and Leo provided perfect step-by-step solutions. What more reason is there to doubt?" "He must have been coached," Veronica insisted, her voice rising slightly. "These are college-level approaches. No 13-year-old boy could..." A knock on the door interrupted her. Principal Williams frowned at the interruption, but said, "Come in." The door opened, revealing a distinguished-looking man with wire-rimmed glasses and a neat salt-and-pepper beard. Leo's face lit up. "Dr. Roberts," he exclaimed. "I apologize for the intrusion," Dr. Roberts said. "I'm James Roberts, a professor of mathematics at the State University. I understand you're discussing Leo's mathematical abilities, and I thought I might be able to provide some relevant context." Principal Williams, surprised, gestured to an empty chair. "Dr. Roberts, what is your connection to this situation?" Principal Williams asked, his expression skeptical. "I have been a mentor to Leo Morgan for the past 6 months," Dr. Roberts explained, taking a seat. "He is quite possibly the most talented young mathematician I have encountered in my 30 years of teaching." Veronica Stone's expression shifted from skepticism to shock. "You expect us to believe that a college professor has been secretly tutoring an 8th grader?" "Not tutoring," Dr. Roberts corrected. "Mentoring. There's a big difference. Tutoring implies helping with weaknesses. Leo doesn't need that. He needs advanced material and guidance to develop his extraordinary talent. We met at the community center." Leo added, his voice regaining its confidence. "Dr. Roberts saw me working on calculus problems and offered to help." Principal Williams leaned back in his chair, trying to process this new information. "Dr. Roberts, would you be willing to review Leo's test and give a professional assessment?" "Of course," Dr. Roberts agreed, taking the copy of the test Principal Williams handed him. As he scanned the pages, his expression grew increasingly pleased. "Excellent, Leo," he murmured. "Especially the solution to problem 17. A very elegant approach." He looked up at the principal. "There is no doubt in my mind that Leo solved these problems independently. His work demonstrates the exact same unique approach I've observed in our sessions." He adjusted his glasses. "In fact, I would estimate his mathematical ability to be on par with a second-year math major." Veronica let out a choked sound of disbelief. "This is preposterous. Yesterday he was a mediocre student, and today we're supposed to believe he's some sort of prodigy." "He was never a mediocre student," Dr. Roberts said firmly. "He was a gifted young man whose abilities were unrecognized, and even worse, actively denied by the very education system that was supposed to be nurturing him." The silence that followed was broken by Principal Williams. "I believe we have sufficient evidence to conclude that Leo's mathematical abilities are in fact extraordinary, and that his solution to Miss Stone's classroom challenge yesterday was completely legitimate." He turned to Leo. "I owe you an apology for not believing you initially. The school failed you, and for that, I am truly sorry." For Leo, those words, a simple acknowledgement of the truth, meant more than any praise. He nodded, fighting back unexpected tears. "So, what happens now?" Ms. Carter asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Principal Williams straightened up. "First, we need to develop a proper educational plan for Leo, one that challenges him at his true level." His gaze moved to Veronica, who had become a statue. "Second, we need to address the serious allegations of physical abuse." "The marks could have come from anywhere," Veronica protested weakly. "There's no proof." "There will be an investigation," Principal Williams said definitively. "And I will be speaking with Leo's parents this afternoon." He turned back to Leo and Dr. Roberts. "Thank you both for your patience through this. Dr. Roberts, would you be willing to continue working with our school to support Leo's development?" "It would be my honor," Dr. Roberts replied warmly. As they left the office, Veronica sat alone, her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble around her. News of Leo Morgan's extraordinary math abilities spread through Westside Middle School like wildfire. The next morning, students who had previously ignored him now watched him openly as he walked down the halls. Some approached with curious questions, while others, including Zach, offered awkward apologies for their past behavior. "Is it true you can do college-level math?" Zach asked at lunch, sliding into the seat across from Leo. "Everyone's talking about it." Before Leo could answer, 3 other students joined their table, something that had never happened before. "My brother's in high school calculus," a girl said. "He didn't believe me when I told him about you, so he sent me this problem." She pushed a notebook toward Leo. "He said it's super hard." Leo glanced at it and gave a small smile. "This is a partial differential equation. It's not too bad, actually." He took a pencil and began to solve, explaining each step as a growing crowd of students watched in amazement. Meanwhile, in the school's administrative wing, a more serious conversation was taking place. Leo's parents sat across from Principal Williams, their faces a mix of anger and resolve, as they looked at the photos of their son's injuries taken by the school nurse. "We trusted this school with our son," Mr. Morgan said, his voice laced with restraint. "We work extra shifts to live in this district because the schools are supposed to be better. And this is how our son is treated." Mrs. Morgan, still in her nurse's aide uniform from her morning shift, wiped away a tear. "When he didn't want to go to school, he never told us why. We thought maybe he was being bullied by other kids, but we never dreamed." Her voice trailed off. "I understand your anger," Principal Williams said somberly. "And you have every right to feel that way. We have initiated a formal investigation, and Ms. Stone has been placed on administrative leave pending its outcome." That's not enough, Mr. Morgan insisted. She hit our son multiple times and then tried to humiliate him when he showed his true talent. We are also implementing immediate policy changes, Principal Williams assured them, including a zero-tolerance policy for all forms of physical discipline and mandatory reporting of all disciplinary actions. But most importantly, we are putting an appropriate academic plan in place for Leo. He slid a folder across the table. Dr. Roberts helped us draft this proposal. It includes advanced math classes at the high school 3 mornings a week, continued mentorship with Dr. Roberts, and adjusted assignments in his regular classes to better fit his abilities. Mrs. Morgan opened the folder, her eyes wide as she scanned the contents. This is more than we could have ever imagined for him. Your son has extraordinary gifts, Principal Williams said sincerely. Gifts that this school failed to recognize and nurture. I am committed to making sure that never happens again, not just with Leo, but with any student. As the meeting continued, Veronica Stone sat alone in her empty apartment, staring at the formal investigation notice on her coffee table. 27 years of teaching a spotless record, and now, ruin. The image she had so carefully maintained, a respected educator, a person of authority, was crumbling under the weight of her own actions. Her phone rang for the 5th time that morning, another colleague, no doubt calling to express shock or worse, silent support, a way of acknowledging the wrong while trying to downplay it. She ignored it. The truth was, Veronica had seen Leo's brilliance from the very beginning. It had unsettled her, threatened her. In her classroom, excellence was supposed to come from years of disciplined study and respect for authority, not from some innate gift in a quiet boy from a working-class family. A knock on her door startled her. She opened it to find Dr. Roberts standing in the hallway, his expression grave. "Dr. Roberts," she said stiffly, "if you've come to gloat, I've come to understand," he interrupted gently. "May I come in?" Dr. Roberts stepped inside, declining her rote offer of coffee and taking a seat in an armchair. "I have been a teacher for over 30 years, he began. "I've seen thousands of students, some who struggle, some who excel, but only a few. Very few who possess something extraordinary. Leo is one of those rare students." "Everyone keeps telling me that," Veronica replied bitterly. "What I can't understand," Dr. Roberts continued as if she hadn't spoken, "is why you felt so threatened by it. Why you felt the need to snuff out his flame instead of helping it shine." The calm facade that Veronica had maintained for decades finally shattered. "Because he made a mockery of everything I believed education was," she sobbed. "I spent decades mastering mathematics. I earned my expertise through years of study and sacrifice. Then this boy, this child comes along and intuitively understands concepts that took me years to grasp. How is that fair?" Dr. Roberts looked at her thoughtfully. "Mathematics is not about fairness, Ms. Stone. It's about truth. And the truth is, some minds are uniquely wired to see patterns and connections that others have to work hard to recognize. That doesn't diminish your accomplishments or your knowledge." He leaned forward. "The tragedy here isn't that Leo had a special gift. It's that you saw that gift as a threat instead of an opportunity, for him, for your other students, and even for yourself." As Dr. Roberts' words sank in, Veronica buried her face in her hands, decades of rigid certainty beginning to crumble under the weight of an unpalatable truth. The school board meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m., but by 6:15, the room was already packed. Parents, teachers, students, and community members filled the seats, while local reporters had set up cameras in the back of the room. Leo's story had been leaked to the media, sparking community outrage and calls for accountability. Leo sat with his parents in the front row, uncomfortable with the attention, but fortified by the reassuring presence of Dr. Roberts beside him. Behind them sat Ms. Carter and a handful of other teachers who had come to show their support. At exactly 7 p.m., the 5 members of the school board entered and took their places at the raised table. The board's president, Eleanor Washington, a stern-faced woman with decades of experience in education, called the meeting to order. Tonight's agenda has been amended to address the serious allegations that have arisen at Westside Middle School, she announced. We will hear from Principal Williams, followed by remarks from the public, after which the board will announce its decisions regarding disciplinary action and policy changes. Principal Williams approached the podium, his face somber. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. What I have to share tonight is deeply troubling, but necessary for transparency and healing. He recounted in detail the events surrounding Leo's case, from the classroom humiliation to the discovery of physical abuse and the revelation of Leo's extraordinary mathematical talent. Most troubling, Principal Williams concluded, is that our system failed to protect a student from abuse and failed to recognize exceptional ability. Both failures demand immediate and decisive correction. Mr. Morgan was the first to speak, his voice steady despite his emotion. My son endured pain and humiliation in silence because he did not believe that adults would side with him over a person in authority. That is not just the failure of one teacher. It is a failure of trust in our entire educational system. Ms. Carter then spoke, emphasizing the need for better processes to identify and support exceptional students. Then, unexpectedly, Zach approached the microphone. I was in Ms. Stone's class with Leo, he began nervously. I laughed when she made fun of him, because I thought that's just how teachers keep control. I feel really bad now. If even kids like me could see she was targeting him, why couldn't the adults? His sincere question hung in the air, indicting not just Veronica Stone, but the culture that had enabled her behavior. After nearly an hour of remarks, President Washington called for order. We have heard your concerns, and we share them. The board has deliberated extensively and has reached the following decisions. The room fell silent as she continued. First, regarding Ms. Veronica Stone. Based on the evidence presented, including a student's documented physical injuries, witness testimony, and Ms. Stone's own admissions during the investigation, the board has unanimously voted to terminate her employment immediately. In addition, we will be reporting this case to the State Licensing Board with a recommendation to revoke her teaching certificate. A round of applause erupted throughout the room, quickly quelled by the president's raised hand. However, accountability cannot end with one teacher. The board is therefore implementing the following district-wide changes: mandatory training for all staff on recognizing and reporting suspected abuse, a zero-tolerance policy for any form of physical discipline, new protocols for identifying and supporting academically gifted students, and an anonymous reporting system so that students can safely report concerns. She looked directly at Leo and his parents. On behalf of the entire school district, I offer my sincerest apologies for the harm that was done to Leo and our commitment to ensuring that nothing like this ever happens again. As the meeting adjourned, Leo found himself surrounded by well-wishers, students, parents, and teachers expressing their support and admiration. The attention was overwhelming, but for the first time, it wasn't negative. These people weren't seeing him as a problem to be solved. They were seeing him for who he truly was. Later that night, as Leo and his parents drove home, his mother reached back and squeezed his hand. I'm so proud of you, honey. Not just because you're smart, I always knew you were smart. I'm proud of your courage. I wasn't very brave, Leo admitted. I never said what happened. But you also never gave up, his father said, looking at Leo in the rearview mirror. You kept learning, you kept growing, even when people tried to hold you back. That's a different kind of brave, the kind of brave that can change lives. Leo gave a small smile watching the familiar streets of his neighborhood pass by. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, advanced classes, higher expectations, and the unfamiliar experience of being seen and appreciated. But tonight, in the warmth and pride of his parents' presence, he allowed himself to feel the relief of a truth finally recognized. 3 months after the school board meeting, Westside Middle School had changed in ways both subtle and profound. New anti-bullying posters hung in the hallways, featuring diverse faces and messages of respect and inclusion. A new special talents program had been created, identifying 17 students with various advanced abilities. But the most significant change was in the school's culture. Teachers who had once turned a blind eye to problematic behavior now proactively intervened. Leo, now taking advanced high school math classes 3 mornings a week, had become a quiet celebrity not just for his mathematical prowess, but for being the catalyst for change. The initial discomfort of being in the spotlight had given way to a cautious confidence as he realized his story had helped others. On a Tuesday afternoon, Leo sat in the school library surrounded by a small group of 6th and 7th graders. "So you see," Leo explained, sketching a diagram on a piece of paper, "when you look at word problems, there's always a hidden pattern inside. You just need to find the right language to translate the words into numbers." "That makes so much sense," a 6th grader named Amara said, her eyes lighting up with understanding. "Ms. Collins never explained it like that." Leo smiled. "Different explanations work for different people. Maybe this way just makes more sense to you." From a nearby table, Ms. Carter watched with pride. "You're quite the teacher," she said after the younger students had dispersed. "You have a gift for explaining complex ideas in simple terms." Leo packed up his books, a little embarrassed by the praise. "I just remember what it was like to be confused and not have anyone really listen." "That's the empathy that makes the difference," Ms. Carter replied. "Have you thought more about that summer math program at the university that Dr. Roberts mentioned? You seemed hesitant about applying." Leo nodded. "My parents said I could go. It's just, I'm still getting used to people seeing me. Really seeing me." "Take it at your own pace," she advised. "Just don't let old fears limit new possibilities." As they walked out of the library, they passed the classroom that had once belonged to Veronica Stone. It now belonged to Mr. Diaz, a young teacher whose enthusiasm and inclusive teaching style had quickly made him a student favorite. Through the open door, Leo could see Mr. Diaz illustrating a concept with animated gestures, walking around the room instead of standing imperiously at the front. The atmosphere couldn't have been more different from the tense silence that had once characterized Ms. Stone's classes. "Some good things came out of all that happened," Leo observed quietly. "Thanks to your courage," Ms. Carter reminded him. Outside in the spring sunshine, Leo saw his dad's truck waiting. Since the school board meeting, his parents had rearranged their schedules to be more present for Leo's school events and academic pursuits. "See you tomorrow, Ms. Carter," Leo said, waving. "Don't forget the science club is presenting at the board meeting Thursday night," she called after him. As Leo walked toward his dad's truck, he passed a group of 8th graders who nodded in greeting. These were the same students who just months ago would have either ignored or ridiculed him. The memory of standing in Ms. Stone's class, his back aching, solving a calculus problem for humiliation, felt almost surreal. That day had been a turning point, not just for him, but for an entire school community. The cruelty of one teacher intended to snuff out a student had instead ignited a movement toward recognizing and celebrating the unique potential in every child. Leo climbed into his dad's truck, already talking animatedly about the equations he was exploring with Dr. Roberts. As they drove away from Westside Middle School, the afternoon sun glinted on a new sign near the entrance, installed just last week, that read, "Every student deserves to be seen, to be heard, and to be valued for who they are." A week later, Principal Williams' office was once again the center of a different kind of confrontation. This time it was not a fight, but a tense meeting. Veronica Stone, sitting in absolute silence, faced Principal Williams, Ms. Carter, and Dr. Roberts. Everyone was staring at the folder on the table, which contained the irrefutable evidence. Dr. Roberts began with a cold statement. "Veronica, I didn't come here to gloat, but I came to expose the truth. The test you gave Leo was not a fair test. It was a meticulously crafted trap." Ms. Stone raised her head, her face full of defiance. "I don't know what you're talking about." Dr. Roberts pulled out a well-worn, old math book. "This book belonged to Professor Dawson, our instructor at MIT. You and I both studied it. In your test, there was a question about an outdated theorem that you deliberately included a question that if Leo had simply relied on rote memorization, he would never have been able to solve. Are you accusing me of fraud?" Ms. Stone stood up from her chair, her voice trembling. "No, I'm not accusing you of fraud," Dr. Roberts replied calmly. "I'm saying that your question was outdated. It had been disproven by part of another theorem that you conveniently ignored. Leo not only solved the problem, but he also pointed out its obsolescence. It shows that he is not a rote memorizer, he is a deep thinker. It's a big difference." The room fell into silence. Veronica sank back into her chair, her face pale. She had no words to defend herself. She had failed. Dr. Roberts placed the book on the table and turned to Principal Williams. "Mr. Principal, Leo's story is not just about an excellent student. It's a story about the failure of the education system. Veronica is not an inherently cruel person. She's a person who is haunted by her own failure. She saw in Leo a reflection of her younger self, a talent not bound by rules, and she tried to break him, not because she wanted to hurt him, but because she wanted to save him from the path she had taken." Veronica raised her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes," she said, her voice full of bitterness. "I used to be a genius. I used to believe that I would change the world, but the world changed me. And when I saw Leo, I saw my younger self. I tried to make him follow the rules so he wouldn't make the same mistakes I did. But I was wrong." Principal Williams looked at Veronica with pity. "Ms. Stone, I understand your bitterness, but what you did was unacceptable. You hurt a student both physically and emotionally. You lost our respect, and you lost your own." Ms. Stone stood up, not looking at anyone. She slowly walked out of the room, leaving behind her career, her reputation, and a mountain of regrets. The truth had been exposed. Veronica Stone was fired. But the story didn't end there. Leo's struggle had become the catalyst for a major change. Principal Williams, with the help of Ms. Carter and Dr. Roberts, built a new education program where students were not only taught knowledge, but were also encouraged to explore and develop their talents. Leo Morgan was no longer an invisible boy. He had become a symbol of change. His former classmates who had once laughed at him now looked at him with a new respect. Zach, the troublemaker, became Leo's friend and even helped him in study groups. In a newly established classroom, Leo became a mentor for younger students, including Aisha, the girl who had bravely saved his torn paper. Leo didn't just teach them math. He taught them how to find the beauty in numbers, and more importantly, how not to be afraid of being themselves. Leo's story is not just a story about math. It's a story about courage, about truth, and about change. It's a story about how one boy stood up and changed an entire system. It's a story about a language, the language of numbers, that became the language of freedom. The truth had been exposed. Veronica Stone was fired. But the story didn't end there. Leo's struggle became the catalyst for a major change. Principal Williams, with the help of Ms. Carter and Dr. Roberts, built a new educational program where students were not only taught knowledge, but were also encouraged to discover and develop their talents. Leo Morgan was no longer an invisible boy. He had become a symbol of change. His old classmates who had once ridiculed him now looked at him with new respect. Zach, the class troublemaker, became Leo's friend and even helped him in study groups. In a newly established classroom, Leo became a mentor for younger students, including Aisha, the girl who had bravely saved his torn paper. Leo didn't just teach them mathematics. He taught them how to find the beauty in numbers, and more importantly, how not to be afraid of being themselves. Leo's story was not just a story about mathematics. It was a story about courage, truth, and change. It was a story about how one boy stood up and changed an entire system. It was a story about a language, the language of numbers, that became the language of freedom. 3 months after the events at school, Leo had fully integrated into his new life. He now spent 3 mornings a week at the local high school, where he took advanced math classes with older students. Initially, he still felt out of place and a bit anxious. But with the guidance of Dr. Roberts and the encouragement of Ms. Carter, he quickly proved his abilities. Leo no longer had to hide himself. He could freely discuss complex formulas, share his new discoveries, and enjoy the pleasure of learning alongside people who shared his passion. Although still a shy boy, Leo had a newfound confidence, a confidence that came from being himself. Leo's story had spread far and wide. Other schools in the district also began to adopt similar policies to find and develop hidden talents. The Language of Numbers program, founded by Leo, Dr. Roberts, and Ms. Carter, attracted many students and became a symbol of change. On a sunny morning, Leo stood in front of the school waiting for the bus to take him to the high school. His father, the bricklayer with calloused hands, had taken the time to see him off at the gate. "Son," his father said, placing a hand on his shoulder, "I'm so proud of you." Leo smiled. "Thank you, Dad." "Do you remember what I told you?" his father asked. "Numbers are the language of the universe. When people stop making sense, numbers always will." "I remember," Leo replied. His father nodded. "But now you've shown me something else. You've shown me that when people stand up for the truth, they can also create their own language, a language of fairness and courage. That's a language even more powerful than numbers." Leo looked at his father, a warm feeling swelling in his heart. The bus arrived, and he got on. Through the window, he saw his father smiling and waving. Leo waved back. He was ready for a new day, a new future where he could be free to be himself and use his talent to help others. Leo's story had ended, but the story of change was still ongoing. It had become a lesson for everyone, that every child has a special gift, and it is our duty to find nurture and protect it. 3 months after the incident at school, Westside Middle School was completely transformed. The hallways were no longer a place of malicious whispers, but of laughter and open conversations. Leo Morgan, now a symbol, was no longer a lonely boy. He had found a new group of friends who genuinely appreciated his talent, and surprisingly, that group included Zach. One afternoon after school, Zach came to see Leo. He no longer had his old arrogant demeanor. Instead, he seemed a bit hesitant. "Hey, Leo," Zach said, scratching his head. I want to apologize." Leo looked at Zach in surprise. He hadn't expected Zach to come and talk to him. "It's okay, Zach," Leo said, his voice full of sincerity. "No, it's really not okay," Zach insisted. "I laughed at you. I made Ms. Stone think she could get away with anything with you. I was part of the problem, and I feel really bad about it." Leo looked at Zach, and he saw genuine remorse in his eyes. "I was so scared," Leo admitted. "But it's all in the past now." "No," Zach shook his head. "It's not in the past. It's just the beginning. You showed us how important it is to stand up for the truth. You changed this whole school." Zach's words touched Leo's heart. He wasn't just recognized for his talent, he was appreciated for his courage. Leo was no longer an invisible person. He had become a person with a voice. The change wasn't limited to the students. The teachers had changed too. Mr. Diaz, who had replaced Ms. Stone, had turned her classroom into a space full of creativity and joy. Students were no longer afraid of making mistakes. They saw mistakes as an opportunity to learn. Ms. Carter and Dr. Roberts had founded a new program called The Language of Numbers to find and develop hidden math talents. Leo had become a mentor for the younger students, including Aisha. One afternoon, Leo was tutoring Aisha on a complex problem. She had become much more confident. Aisha was no longer a shy girl, but a student full of curiosity and enthusiasm. "You know, Leo," Aisha said, "I kept your torn paper. I thought it was important evidence. I wanted to give it to Principal Williams, but I was scared." Leo smiled. "You did the most important thing. You believed in me." On a sunny morning, Leo stood in front of the school waiting for the bus to take him to the high school. His father, the bricklayer, with calloused hands, had taken the time to see him off at the gate. "Son," his father said, placing a hand on his shoulder, "I'm so proud of you." Leo smiled. "Thank you, Dad." "Do you remember what I told you?" his father asked. "Numbers are the language of the universe. When people stop making sense, numbers always will." "I remember," Leo replied. His father nodded. "But now you've shown me something else. You've shown me that when people stand up for the truth, they can also create their own language, a language of fairness and courage. That's a language even more powerful than numbers." Leo looked at his father, a warm feeling swelling in his heart. The bus arrived, and he got on. Through the window, he saw his father smiling and waving. Leo waved back. He was ready for a new day, a new future where he could be free to be himself and use his talent to help others. Leo's story had ended, but the story of change was still ongoing. It had become a lesson for everyone, that every child has a special gift, and it is our duty to find nurture and protect it. 3 months after the school incident, West Side Middle School had been completely transformed. New anti-bullying posters with diverse images and messages of respect were hung throughout the hallways. A special talent program had been established, finding 17 students with various abilities from music to languages. But the most profound change was in the school's culture. Teachers no longer ignored inappropriate behavior, but actively intervened. Leo was no longer the invisible boy. He had become a symbol, a quiet leader. The initial discomfort with the spotlight gradually faded, replaced by a cautious confidence as he realized his story had inspired others. One afternoon, Leo sat in the school library, surrounded by a group of 6th and 7th graders. He started an impromptu tutoring session, turning difficult problems into an exciting game. "You see," Leo explained, sketching a diagram on paper, "when you look at word problems, there's always a hidden pattern inside. You just need to find the right language to translate the words into numbers." A 6th grader named Amara, her eyes lighting up with understanding, exclaimed, "That's so easy to understand. Ms. Collins never explained it like that." Leo smiled. Different explanations work for different people. Maybe this way just makes more sense to you. As the younger students left, Ms. Carter approached Leo. "You're a natural-born teacher," she observed. "You have a knack for explaining complex ideas in simple terms." Leo, a little shy, packed up his books. "I just remember what it felt like to be confused and not have anyone really listen." "That empathy is what makes the difference," Ms. Carter replied. "Have you thought more about the summer math program at the university you were hesitant about applying?" Leo nodded. "My parents said I could go. It's just, I'm still getting used to people actually seeing me." "Take it at your own pace," she advised. But don't let old fears hold back new possibilities. As they walked out of the library, they passed Ms. Stone's former classroom. Now Mr. Diaz, the new teacher, was lecturing with enthusiasm, making the whole class lively. The tense atmosphere of the past had completely disappeared. "Some good things came out of all that happened," Leo observed. "Thanks to your courage," Ms. Carter reminded him. Outside, Leo saw his dad's truck waiting. His dad had made time to be more present in his life. As Leo walked toward the truck, he passed a group of 8th graders and nodded a greeting. The memory of standing in Ms. Stone's class, his back aching, solving a problem to be humiliated, seemed like a distant dream. That day was a turning point not just for him, but for an entire school community. The cruelty of one teacher had unintentionally ignited a movement, a cultural change where every student deserved to be seen, to be heard, and to be valued for who they are.